It's all in your mind, all of the time. Oh, that to my rhyme, make up your mind, yeah. Oh, you know, I think all your love is enough.
We're sponsored this week by Decode DC, the podcast that gives you an honest look into how politics affects your life. The host of Decode DC, Jimmy Williams. You got to hear this guy. He's worked for Republicans, for Democrats, and even as a lobbyist. He's taking all that experience and he's explaining how things really work inside and outside of Washington. Decode DC is smart, surprising, and it challenges the conventional wisdom, like in a recent episode about how Donald Trump might deal with his conflicts of interest or not deal with them, or when he talks about the moving day at the White House as told by somebody who really lived through it. And that always was actually something fascinating to me. You got to listen to this show. Check it out. I did. I think you'll love it. That's Decode DC, available on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts.
The Majority Report with Sam Cedar.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Cedar.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Cedar.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, February 6, 2017. My name is Michael Brooks, and I'm Michael Monday, and this is the four-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On today's program, Michael Cunican on why Republicans are impressive, how a fringe party with an extremist agenda has continued to dominate American politics in spite of all the odds, what Democrats can learn from them. Can Democrats ever get ruthless and understand how power really works? We'll be talking about that. Also, resistance. Is it working? Yes, to some extent. A sweeping stay from a circuit court judge in Seattle, at the same time as Republicans are scurrying like ferrets and weasels from town halls where constituents are demanding to know what they will do if they strip their health care from them. Stay on the streets, keep the calls going. It's the only way that we can avert a complete catastrophe orchestrated by hashtag President Bannon. And is that hashtag starting to upset Mr. Donald Trump, our president? Looks like it might be. He's taken to Twitter. But do Bannon and Trump have a mind meld deeper than Trump's usual appetite for things? And is that a mind meld rooted in a deep commitment to ethno-nationalist racism? We'll get into that. Also, new sanctions on Iran, actually not as aggressive as they could have been. We'll keep monitoring that. Marine Le Pen officially announces she's running for president in France, leading with a triple attack on globalization, Islam, and the European Union. Fascism has a different hybrid in France. We'll check in on that election. And the Chinese Communist Party warns that war between China and the United States isn't really something that would be like inevitable and fun to speculate about on a podcast. It would actually be a disaster for the world. In the bizarre situation we find ourselves in, where we rely on the Chinese Communist Party, maybe to have some rationality, more than our administration. I can't talk about the Super Bowl. I couldn't watch it because I can't root for the Pats anymore. Last year, if this had happened, I would have come in with the most obnoxious, like, dude, I think they did it on purpose so that the Falcons thought they had it just to F with them, dude. Boston. I can't do it anymore. I skipped it. I was actually doing some stuff in Jersey yesterday, and I timed it so I would be coming back to the city. I didn't want to watch it. It's the first Super Bowl I've missed in years, and I'm not like Lady Gaga. I mean, I'm not mad at her, but that's not a halftime performance I need to see. So
I didn't do anything crazy, but I watched the game and had a few beers with some friends, and I don't like getting involved in the sort of partisan of sports. I like to be nonpartisan in sports. Just enjoy the good athletics going on. But I realized after like the first couple minutes that I was definitely rooting for
Matt Leck enjoys the good athletics going on.
It's how the game's played. But I realized in my gut, deep down, I was definitely rooting for the Falcons whenever they'd break off a large run.
Yep.
And so I was enjoying it for the most part of the game, but I also was smart enough to know that this is probably going to come to an end. So I didn't get involved in the sort of pre-gloating celebrations, thinking that we were going to take down Tom Brady in a sort of anti-fascist victory, but I knew it was going to happen, so here we are.
It was really depressing.
I realized 0 minutes in that I didn't know that it was happening, and also was not going to watch it and was rooting for no one. And a couple hours
Take
later,
that, Dad.
a couple hours later, I realized that it had happened, and then I Googled it and was annoyed that the Patriots won, and realized that all my shows I wanted to watch were preempted. So then it sucked.
All around suckitude. Okay. A couple now. I Saturday Night Live, they're kind of killing it. This sketch is important. We're going to open with some sound. In the same way that you can directly influence the president's opinion through Morning Joe or by tweeting at him, these Saturday Night Live sketches might have serious consequences for the management of global and domestic affairs. Steve Bannon, we're going to be talking about him more, obviously, is an incredibly dangerous, disturbing presence. But what I love about this sketch is I think just the idea that Bannon is orchestrating everything is going to make Trump go nuts. And also the part of this sketch over the weekend where Trump is calling random foreign leaders to try to, intimidate them. There's part of these jokes here where I have never thought that a certain comedic sensibility that I have would ever be so much in the mainstream before. So let's look and listen to, depending on your medium of choice, some of this last weekend's SNL Steve Bannon Donald Trump sketch.
That was hilarious.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you. Oh, I just had a great idea. Watch this.
Hello?
Hello, congratulations. You've just won a free cruise for two to Hawaii. All we need is your country's credit card number.
We're not paying for the wall, Donald.
Yes, you are. Steve, all of our so-called allies are being so mean to me.
Why don't you call some random little country and show them who's boss?
What about Zimbabwe?
Perfect. Show them the might of America.
Hello?
Zimbabwe, there's a new sheriff in town.
Wait, is this Donald Trump?
Yes.
You think you're a big tough dictator? I will rip out your spine and drink from your skull. You cannot even walk downstairs, you little white bitch. Don't you ever call Zimbabwe again.
Okay, Donald, that's enough fun for tonight. Can I have my desk back?
Yes, of course, Mr. President. I'll go sit at my desk. Yeah. So much fun. I love it.
Yes, this is fun. And live from New York, it's Saturday night!
All right, that's the best coverage that Robert Mugabe has received in the Western media since at least the 1980s. I feel like a sketch where the president of Zimbabwe threatens to drink Trump's blood and calls him a little white bitch is definitely something I could have written or performed on this show. So I appreciated that. And the last part of that, where Trump goes and what is it? I don't know what they're called, like a slinky.
It's
or
like one of
something.
those expanding sort of universe toys,
Right.
things that you.
When he goes to his mini desk and gives it back to President Bannon. Now it's funny, but what makes it hysterical is that Trump watched it, got infuriated, and Bannon took a break from devising an ethnic cleansing plot because he had an anxiety attack, because he knows that that's the type of thing that puts his job in jeopardy. And we saw this tweet that dropped. Okay. Well, no, you don't have the tweet up. Oh, okay. All right. We'll get to that later. But
I looked up what that toy was
Yes.
because especially if you were just listening, you couldn't see. But Bannon said, "Let me have my desk back," and then took the big desk, and Trump went over to a miniature one, and he played with a toy, and that toy is called a Hoberman sphere.
A Hoberman sphere. Hashtag President Bannon is having an effect. Let me talk about Movement watches. Movement watches were started by two broke kids that wanted to wear stylish watches but couldn't afford them. MVMT, Movement Watches, was founded in the belief that style shouldn't break the bank. And, we know all about this. This is how you launch a podcast. This is how you launch a show on YouTube. Today's world, you can cut out a lot of middlemen, go directly to your audience and produce, hopefully a superior product. That's certainly what Movement is doing in the watch game. So far, by selling their products entirely online, Movement was able to cut out the middleman as well as the retail markup and provide you with the best prices possible. Watches starting at $95. That's a fraction of what department store brands typically charge. This revolutionary pricing, along with the product's classic design, quality construction, and styled minimalism, has led to over 500,000 watches sold in 160 countries. And as we've said, Sam got it for Nikki. It's a major win. This is a very good Valentine gift. I need to get on that. So step up your watch game and see why people across the world love Movement watches. Just go to movementwatches.com/majority and get 15% off today. Plus, with free shipping and free returns. Grab one for Valentine's before it's too late. That's MVMTwatches.com/majority. MVMTwatches.com/majority. Join the movement. There's a link on our website.
They're beautiful watches.
They're beautiful watches.
It's true.
It's really true. Now, let's talk about Blue Apron. Not all ingredients are created equal. Fresh, high-quality ingredients make a real difference, so it's important to know where your food comes from. Thankfully, for less than $10 a person per meal, Blue Apron delivers easy-to-follow recipes along with pre-portioned ingredients, courtesy of over 150 local farms, ranches, and fisheries across the country, across the United States, right to your door. And because Blue Apron ships the exact amount of each ingredient required for a recipe, there's no food to waste. It's everything you need to make sustainable, delicious home-cooked meals for 40 minutes or less. Some of the meals available in February include cashew chicken stir-fry with tango mandarins and jasmine rice. Man. Udon noodle soup with miso and soft-boiled eggs. That's going to be the go-to right there. Roasted pork with apple, walnut, and farro salad, and crispy barramundi with quinoa and roasted carrot salad. Whole new worlds of eating opened up here. Check out this week's menu and get the first 3 meals free with free shipping by going to blueapron.com/majority. You'll love how good it feels and tastes to create incredible home-cooked meals with Blue Apron, so don't wait. That's blueapron.com/majority. Blue Apron, a better way to cook. One more great service I got to tell you about. Okay. Anyone out there in human resources or HR the good anyone out there in human resources or HR, the good listeners in my audience who manage resources that are human. I've got a special message for you. As you always do, listen up. I want to talk about Bamboo HR. This is something that's really designed if you're managing at a kind of smaller scale, like this business, as an example, would benefit a lot from Bamboo. Bamboo HR is the #1 HR management software for small to medium-sized businesses. One simple central system for keeping organized, detailed records for every employee, and automated countless tasks for HR. No more file cabinets, no more spreadsheets, no more messy whiteboards. Accessible through the cloud at any location. Did you forget to log in on an employee's time off or forget that they were out last Monday? Bamboo HR has you covered. Do you have a confidential salary history filled in employee files? Bamboo HR will secure the data and keep accurate records for you. So simple and so delightful to use, you won't need instructions. Everything in one place. Job and salary history, vacation and sick days, benefits, onboarding, training history, performance reviews, and so much more. And now we have a limited time offer. Right now you can try Bamboo HR for free for 14 days. That's right. Kick the tires. Take it for a spin. Just visit bamboo-h-r.com. Click on the mic and enter my code REPORT to get a free 14-day trial. Try it and you'll wonder how you ever got along without it. That's bamboo-h-r.com. Enter my code REPORT. Link on the website. Fresh Two Dope Boys is dropping tomorrow. We had a great live show at Ignition 1 for Two Dope Boys, and some people asked me, they wanted to do a meetup with me. So if you're in the city, just tweet at me at _Michael Brooks, and we'll figure something like that out soon. We'll be right back with Michael Kinukin, on the Majority Report.
All I see is filthiness. Peace and love has gone to rest. Only King Selassie could help with this time. Give we back the good and take the bad out of your mind. We all make it seem to be impossible to live our life. Worship and vanity could never be the way, 'cause it's just not right. Let us work together, let us all unite. Striking the serpent, conquering beasts by their tail. To live a life of only rat race, only destined human to fail. Rise against each other like sharks and whales. Where is all the righteousness? All I see is filthiness. Peace and love has gone to rest. Only King Selassie could help me this time. Give we back the love and take the bad out of your mind. Get the wicked out the way. Rasta Mosiah come for teach them how we pray. In a Babylon too much youths are get stray. Follow Marcus teach and you would never go astray. Only Emmanuel King Selassie I lead the way. Yeah. Where is all the righteousness?
Welcome back to the Majority Report. I'm Michael Brooks. Joining us now is Michael Kinukin. He's a writer based in Brooklyn and editor of the Hypocrite Reader. Michael, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, Michael, you wrote a really, really important piece in Current Affairs called Why Republicans Are Impressive. This is sort of like a blueprint, basically, for how a party that pursues a relentlessly narrow and radical agenda, which we see, and I think it's important that, you know, you didn't just focus on the Trump dimension of it and the white nationalism and this new iteration. You focused on the Republican congressional agenda, which is a sustained and radical and vicious attack on middle-class people, on poor people certainly, and, you know, stands on advocating positions that are well outside of the American mainstream. And you explain why they're politically rewarded for this, sort of in contrast to conventional wisdom about political persuasion. But before we get to that, can you give an example? You talk about Medicaid as an example where Republicans have targeted an effective program that is widely popular, widely beneficial. There's no policy crisis there. There's no actual reason to do anything about Medicaid, and it's certainly popular. Yet they've been waging a war on it for decades and winning.
Yes, that's exactly right. So Medicaid is a great example because it's a very large program. It helps as many as 63 million people, and it's very popular. And it provides desperately needed health care to the American poor. And what you see is not fringe people, but very major people within the Republican House leadership, people like Tom Price and Paul Ryan, who have been for decades, them and their predecessors, advocating various ways to destroy Medicaid, the most popular of which being block granting it, i.e. sort of capping benefits and giving power over to the states to cut it.
So that does two things just really quickly. It basically would mean that it's making it a program that instead of just sort of naturally rising, like it's a recession, more people need Medicaid, so there's going to be, if you meet an eligibility, it would sort of do away with that, and then also, it would turn away a fixed amount to the states, and then obviously there's plenty of states that already practice austerity and don't invest in needed public services, so it would be cut. Anyway, go ahead.
That's exactly right. And those two things are related because in a recession, state governments really hit fiscal problems, right? Their tax revenue goes down, and they need to cut just when people need help most.
Right.
So giving a welfare program over to the states in a block grant form is a powerful way to sort of destroy it without saying you're destroying it. This was pioneered in the Clinton administration with temporary assistance for needy families.
Right.
And it's, again, so this is the agenda of very powerful people within the Republican legislature. And what's striking to me about this, and you could say the same thing about Medicare. Paul Ryan and Tom Price and others have called for making Medicare a premium support program, which means instead of just providing insurance to the elderly, we would give them some money and let them buy their own insurance on the market, which of course would be absolutely disastrous. And what's striking about these is not only that they're awful, because of course, Republican policy for the poor and for the elderly is awful, but also that they're deeply, deeply unpopular, and yet you see very major figures within the Republican establishment pushing very hard for them.
Right.
And that strikes me especially because when you talk to major sort of senior Democrats about big, important reforms, stuff like single-payer health care, free college, that kind of thing, you'll often hear, look, no one's ever going to go for that. We'd love to do it, but it's not it's not popular. It's never going to get passed. But single payer is way, way more popular than cutting Medicare.
Right.
Medicare
So you quote polling. I think it's from Kaiser. Correct me if I'm wrong, but only 13% of Americans support slashing Medicaid, and that's a marginal number at best. And, and of course, within that 13%, I'm sure it's, overrepresentative of either, people who are, completely devotees of sort of crazy fringe right-wing media content or, literally themselves, plutocrats who personally maybe got polled and would like to see people thrown into deeper sort of suffering and poverty. So, before we get into the Democratic kind of weakness, and I think there's a lot to tease out there because I think there's ideological and material reasons for that. Explain, though, how is it that, because again, on its face, there's a certain logic to it, right? These are incredibly unpopular proposals. The country is, changing demographically. Where is the profit for Republicans in this belligerence? Now, there must be material and ideological reasons there as well. As an example, if you're, in a gerrymandered district or representing an extremist agenda that speaks specifically to your constituents, then your political calculus is different than running a national campaign. But explain more just about how Republicans have maintained and profited from this sort of fanaticism, and then we'll get to the Democratic contrast.
That's a great question. So I would say two questions are, how do they profit from it and how do they maintain it?
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of maintenance, what's striking about the Republicans is that for many years they've had very powerful donors very far to the right of the mainstream of the party,
mm-hmm.
who were very, very willing to aggressively primary people in those gerrymandered districts, but also elsewhere. Primary anyone who hewed to a more moderate line. So there's a very aggressive enforcement of party discipline. Gerrymandering clearly matters. It does matter because Republicans in very red districts only have to compete with other Republicans over ideological purity. But so does just the willingness of elements within the party to even risk losing some elections in order to really bring the pain to legislators who are moderate on social issues or moderate on welfare issues.
Right.
And that, and many people over the years have said, especially in the last 4 years of the Obama administration, said that this was going to ultimately kill the Republican Party.
Mm-hmm.
That ultimately you couldn't have these wingnuts running anywhere except deep red territory. You couldn't have that party platform and win a national election. But what we've seen on the contrary is that this has been an extremely successful political project. Not only do the Republicans control the entire federal government, but they've been very, very, very successful on lower down on the ticket in state legislatures, in governors' mansions around the country.
Right.
And I think that brings in the other dimension of this story, which is that not only there's donors and there's extremist donors who are willing to fund these primary campaigns, but there's also the Republican base, which is very highly mobilized
mm-hmm.
and really gets turned on by the idea of, making abortion illegal, cutting welfare, this kind of thing.
Right.
And you see, if you look at, the big Tea Party wave in 2010, where a huge number of very radical GOP congressmen got elected, you see a lot of those people are not party insiders. They're people who were, doing something else with their lives. They were a doctor, they were a small businessman, and really got mobilized by the first couple of years of the Obama administration and were willing to run against the party machine in their districts. And
with financial, see, that's another thing. When we'll get to it because there's a couple of things that have happened recently that put some wrinkles into this. But I think that what you've identified there that's so important is that they're willing to run against a certain part of the local machine, but with an unlimited paycheck or campaign contributions rather from some of the plutocrats you were talking about before. So they can actually play a double game where on one hand they could say, I'm an insurgent against an unresponsive incumbent, but I also, as soon as I come out and, even with the vaguest type of credibility, commit to a fanatic far-right agenda, I know that Pope in North Carolina or the Koch brothers or any of these radical plutocrat families will open up the bank vaults. So you get bust of both worlds.
I think that's absolutely right. And, I think that it speaks to an asymmetry between the Democrats and the Republicans, where the Democrats also have their radical wing, but it is much less well-financed.
Right.
$27 donations only get you so far. And so it's been much less effective in enforcing its vision on the party.
Right. So we'll get to that. But before we do, because I think those are some questions that sort of are harbingers of the future. But before we get there, so you've laid out this case really well, just like you did in the article, that through money, gerrymandering, and organization and aggression, Republicans have maintained and profited from extremism. Now, the argument of the type of weak Democrats, for lack of a better term, that we're talking about, has been a couple of different sort of responses that maybe we can sort of run through and debunk. So one has been, that long delayed boomerang effect, which is that, and occasionally it does happen, but it's reactive. I mean, we saw the height of it in 2008. People were fed up with Republican corruption, extremism, Iraq, and then Democrats won this overwhelming victory. We'll get to that in a moment. So it's not like it doesn't ever happen that there's a backlash, but the notion that, like you said before, this party just keeps burrowing and burrowing deeper into its far-right extremes, even as the country is changing demographically and culturally, even as, things like cutting Medicaid remain incredibly unpopular. So inevitably, it has to backlash, right? And kind of like the height of this was the Clinton campaign. It wasn't even run on a backlash of policy proposals. It was literally just a backlash of like, come on, Donald Trump's an asshole. There's no way you could vote for him. And so, that was like the logical extreme of that positioning. And it didn't even work against the friggin', predator game show host. So explain why the assumption that radicalism would get punished hasn't worked. And through that, I think you can kind of explain, the myth of the center and what American politics actually kind of looks like.
I see, yeah. So I think there are two reasons why this sort of backlash mostly doesn't happen, or at least it happens very, very slowly. The most important one is that a lot of people have this idea that there's this American mainstream, sort of like the average voter, wants things to be pretty much the way they are with a few changes, and then there's sort of fewer extremists on both sides who want big changes. Mm-hmm. I think what that misses is that the vast majority of Americans are nowhere near the center. We live in a very partisan country where, 40 or even 45% of voters on each side, so 90% of everyone, just sort of is deeply influenced by what each party holds as its mainstream position. Mm-hmm. And there are really very few views so extreme that if a major party in the United States decided to take them, it would be anathema to the rest of the country. So the example I gave in the article was, thinking that global warming is a Chinese hoax is a pretty wild idea. And yet, 40% of Americans believe something approximating that. And why do they believe it? Well, because it's what their party believes. Mm-hmm. So Democrats tend to see voters' views as fixed and to sort of maneuver around those views, whereas Republicans realize that if they, as a major party in this country, bring a coherent messaging strategy to an issue, they're going to be very effective in shaping public opinion around that issue.
Yeah, so I think that's true. And now we get, I think to some complications inside Democrats and maybe now potentially with Republicans when we see this kind of backlash with what's happening with Obamacare. But, I think that's definitely true. And we see, at the very least, people coming out of the Bernie Sanders world and, all these groups popping up like Justice Democrats that are at the very least trying to say like, okay, at the bare minimum, why don't we at least be the party of issues that in fact already are overwhelmingly popular? Like you don't even need to massage and bring people over. A vast majorities of people want strong, robust Medicaid. If you get into the details of the polling on Obamacare, there's, certainly that constitutes something like a majority that either want to preserve it or, in fact, to the extent they want to change it, they want to make it significantly more progressive and less neoliberal. We need to have an inequality agenda. At the very least, campaign on what's popular. And I think that is, though, what illustrates part of the problem that Democrats have had in the past in doing what you're talking about, which I agree they need to do. And part of it is that, one is that it's clearly a party that ironically is much more conservative. It has infinitely more respect for institutional legacies. I mean, we see it even in today's world. We have this, demented extremist administration that's also incompetent. And then we have, a Congress that is ready to go for broke on sort of bringing us back to before the New Deal. And we still see people on the Democratic side saying, well, it's a notion that there's adult grown people saying two wrongs don't make a right when they're discussing, how to deal with a Supreme Court pick on a stolen Supreme Court seat is, it would kind of be funny if it wasn't so shocking, delusional, and dangerous. So, so part of it is managerial. And, actually, let's take them in. I'll get to the material part secondly. But what do you think? And also that in the past, and I think it's changing now, in the past, if you looked at poll numbers during the Obama administration, and part of it might be what you're saying, which is that partisans are influenced by their leaders, and Obama always preached moderation and bipartisanship, so there's truth to that. But Democrats steadily as a group have always been more sympathetic in terms of polling. There's always more Democrats that identify as moderate than Republicans identify as moderate versus conservative. There's always more Democrats that have said, yeah, we need to reach out and build compromise. So it also seems that institutionally and as a party of professionals and elites and technocrats, there isn't that same sort of uniformity of fanaticism that Republicans have. And that's the ideological cultural piece. We'll get to the material piece in a second, but can you address that first?
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. And I think there are a number of causes of that. One I would point to is it's important to understand about the current Democratic leadership that its historical memory goes back to the Reagan wave in the 80s and to the sort of almost traumatic experience of seeing this huge Republican majority emerge after, decades of Democrats being the party of government. And to Bill Clinton's response to that, which was essentially to take over a lot of Republican talking points, a lot of Reagan Republican talking points, but to say, we're going to do it, but less so. We're going to cut welfare, but in a more moderate way. We're going to roll back the state, but in a more moderate way. Right. And I think at that moment, the Democrats, on the one hand, gained started winning elections. On the other hand, really lost their coherent ideological center. They stopped defining themselves as the party of the New Deal and the Great Society, and found themselves in this place where they're sort of the party of the status quo. In stark contrast to really, if you listen to Republican rhetoric and sort of internal speeches, they understand themselves as a party that is fighting a war,
right?
To take their country back, basically from the entire legacy of the New Deal and the Great Society. So the Republicans know better what they're about than the Democrats do. I would add that I think a lot of younger Democrats who don't have this sort of Reagan memory tend to project onto the Democratic leadership a much stronger ideological position than actually exists. So you hear sort of, younger Democrats who, for instance, supported Clinton in the primary saying, look, I'm sure Clinton would love to make us into Sweden, but she knows it's impossible. That's actually not so clear.
Right.
Democrats of that generation, they're genuine, authentic moderates. That's how they came up, and that's where they stand. So it's a mistake it's definitely a mistake to see the Democrats as sort of trying but failing to push a radical agenda. Their agenda just isn't that radical, and it has really prevented them from seeing what the modern Republican Party is. from imagining such an ambitious political project.
Right.
They really don't understand how committed, how authentically committed these people are, and how far they'll go.
Right. No doubt about that. And I think so. What also though relates to that. So, and I'll use a sort of indirect example to get there. But it's like if you look at a client list of some Republican consulting firm, you'll usually see it's very synchronized and coherent. It's like I work to elect candidates that are anti-labor, anti-environment, that will make life worse for most people. And then I have clients, corporate clients like Walmart or, whoever else who share a similar agenda to extract, to entrench inequality, and to make life, in fact, worse for most people. If you go to a Democratic consulting shop, and I think this is something that actually has been shifting, but I always remembered, I was researching this, this was around the time of Obama's first election, and I was in college, and you looked at a group like Stan Greenberg's consulting firm, and I actually think Stan Greenberg's a pollster who, certainly from the Democratic mainstream is actually much more sophisticated and intelligent about these things. But you would see, like, okay, you worked for Nelson Mandela, you worked for Human Rights Watch, but then also Monsanto, Boeing, and BP. And, it's like it's just not synchronized. And when it comes to the money, what you made the point earlier was that, the Republican money people are just as crazy and craven as the base. In some ways, they're more so because at least a fair amount of Republican base voters, I think, would like a higher minimum wage. They don't want to cut Medicaid. Wealthy Republican donors are people that, maybe they're most socially moderate, but they don't really care. Their agenda is the same agenda as what you said. It's that extremist counter-revolution to strip away the social safety net and let extractive industries have free reign. Like, that's the game. They're not hiding the ball. Democratic donors are, anything on a spectrum from maybe a kind of genuine sort of, on the most benign end, and I know people have a lot of problems with him, but a benevolent-ish kind of guy like George Soros, who clearly thinks like, okay, I don't have a problem paying some more taxes so people can have health care. And I have some understanding that there's a society and there needs to be some investment in that. Then you have people that, we need to give to both parties and spread the money around. And then there's, hey, I'm pro-choice, but I also am an Israel lunatic, and there needs to be a certain kind of Israel policy. The point being that there are plenty of the Democratic money, as you pointed out earlier, does not synchronize with that leftward focus. So the money is distinct. And then that also creates another situation where, in terms of who's in Congress and who's in power in the Democratic Party, there still isn't even, uniformity on the basics. There isn't even, we'll see if everyone votes against Jeff Sessions. But I mean, that isn't even like leftward unity. Voting against Jeff Sessions means that you are an opponent of neo-Confederate politics. That should be a kind of very baseline position of being part of a 21st century center-left party. So what's the material answer to that problem? Is it, getting away from the big donors? What's the story there?
Right. So just to underline what you said about lack of conformity on the basics, in 2015, the Senate Democrats tried to agree on a climate policy that they would vote for after the election and couldn't even agree on, cap and trade or a carbon tax. There's really, really disagreement on basic issues. And you're totally right. That has a lot to do with the donor networks. To put it very bluntly, if we want the Democratic Party to become more progressive, we can't do it while relying on the money of billionaires. And a big part of the Democrats' problem right now is that the only sane place to get the money you need to be a competitive national party, if you're going to be a center-left party, is labor unions.
Right.
And Democrats really made a conscious decision over the course of the past 20 years that sort of the labor movement was a dead end, it was going to die, and they should place their hopes elsewhere.
Right.
Whereas the Republicans, they're very anti-union. We might see national right to work this year or next year during this administration. And part of that is obviously ideologically they hate workers, but another big part of it is that they realize that the unions are a very important source of funding for progressive policies, and there's this tactical argument for destroying unions. And Democrats really, they don't think like that. They don't think, whether we think unions are popular or poll well or not, they're an important part of our coalition. They look at the polling and they're like, okay, well, that was nice for a while. We'll try to get our money elsewhere. And there are never going to be as many billionaires who are ready to donate to raise their taxes as there are who are going to donate to lower their taxes.
Right.
So I think,
yeah.
Mhm.
No, it's just interesting because it's like the party that is obviously much more represented with professionals and academics and is more intellectual, but it's like Democrats are more cerebral, but Republicans are way more strategic. That's the kind of, like, we get stuck in these, like, oh, this is an interesting Vox explainer about how something works in the government that whatever, but. More Republicans are like, I don't know any of those details. I just know that if we can strip labor unions away, we can both reward our people, push our agenda, and incidentally kneecap our opponents. I mean, that's strategy. And it's that, it's the party of like less intellectualism has been infinitely better at understanding how power works.
Yes, I think that's absolutely right. I think the Democrats think in terms of building a natural majority, and the Republicans think in terms of taking their country back from those people. And anything they can do to destroy those people, they are happy to do.
Exactly right, right. I know. Finish your thought. It just brings me back to the 90s because in this modern, like, if you go back and look at like the Clinton history that you alluded to earlier, now the debate kind of got positioned, and we need to move beyond this very quickly, that there's some type of contradiction between being serious about overcoming structural racism and social progress with income inequality in that crisis. They're, of course, totally interconnected. And the same people on the sort of wing of the party that don't want to be serious about inequality, their sort of forebearers in the 90s were actually willing to do what they fake Bernie Sanders does, which is that they were actually willing to race bait. They were actually willing to even play with the base in those ways in order to triangulate to the center.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely correct. And an important kind of memory to preserve that, again, a lot of people who are in their 20s and 30s and maybe in the Clinton wing of the party don't really remember that.
Right.
But we know very clearly what it looks like for the Democrats to sell out racial minorities because it was done.
Right.
Like, it was
not
done
that long ago.
The worst way possible.
We were already born. As a final question, though, you're right that the Republicans have gotten away with it and they've benefited, but now we're seeing, and this is another, Democratic messaging failure, obviously, but now that Obamacare is actually on the table and people see what it actually means, we're going to play footage in the second half of Republicans fleeing from town halls. We had the leaked tapes last week of these Republicans all of a sudden, they're scurrying like rats on a ship, because when it actually comes to, okay, now it's on the chopping block, and my constituent who maybe last week they were emailing me an Alex Jones article about Muslim drinking water or whatever, but now all of a sudden I'm going to take away their pre-existing care coverage, pre-existing condition coverage. That matters, and there actually is a backlash. So do you think that as part of this overall strategic frame that, when Republicans are actually fully in a position to do all of this, is there a backlash to it that doesn't even rely on Democrats not being strategic? Like, it's almost incidental to them because the assault on people is so intense.
I mean, that's the hope. And
Yeah.
I wrote that article before the inauguration and before we saw this tremendous backlash. And things are looking a lot better for Obamacare than I thought they might be.
Right.
I think what that speaks to is that, if you were running Clinton's campaign in October, it turns out what you should have said is the Republicans will kill children. And you should have said it again and again and again.
Exactly.
And
by the way, Republicans, not just Trump, the whole system, they all want to do this.
Absolutely,
Yes.
exactly. And they said it over and over again. And I think people at some level didn't believe them. If you try to pull people on what do you think of Paul Ryan's plan for Medicare, people will tell you outright, I don't believe anyone in American politics holds this view because it's so deeply unpopular. And I think
And
voters
sociopathic.
themselves-
Exactly. And sociopathic.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Right.
And I think voters, mainstream voters, but also the Democrats themselves, sort of didn't really, again, it's a failure of imagination. They didn't really see how serious these people were. And now that they do, I think we're in a completely new situation where, yes, voters are absolutely rebelling against a plan that would strip health care from 20 million people.
Right.
And I think what we're seeing is Democrats in Congress, struggling to keep up with the radicalism and the horror of not only their base, but just ordinary people in Kansas who are about to see their health care stripped away from them. So to me, that's very, very hopeful.
Yeah, and I think the maybe they could finally learn. I think that the subtext of your article, and it's so important because there's been this paradox, I think, culturally on the left, where people on one hand, we are way more willing to say like, oh, Paul Ryan couldn't possibly want to do something that vindictive or cruel, or even the kind of conversation that people got really obsessed with before, when everybody thought Hillary would win, of like, are we just in these elite bubbles, and what are people really, and then at the same time being like, basically assuming like, hey, the Republicans are idiots and they're not as good, and we've got the analytics and we've got Barack and all of this kind of cultural signifier of sophistication, when in the fact it's the exact opposite. It's actually like, look, don't worry about being in your bubble. Don't worry about thinking that Paul Ryan is a hidden heart. He doesn't. They don't. It's political trench warfare. And on the flip side, you know what? Steve Bannon, Breitbart beat Google. Like, these people are way more savvy and strategic, in fact, than we've wanted to realize. And, that I think is the kind of paradox of our political moment. And I hope we're getting that. And I really liked your article because I think it expressed it very well.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah. And it was a pleasure to write it for Current Affairs. And thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Michael Cunican, I hope I pronounced that correctly. I don't know why I'm having trouble with that one. Sorry? Cunican.
Yeah.
Journalist based in Brooklyn. The piece is in Current Affairs. There's a link on our website. Also an editor at The Hypocrite Reader. Michael, I will talk to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.
Bye.
Okay, everybody. We're going to get to the fun half of the program. Subscribe to Two Dope Boys in a Podcast. Fresh one dropping tomorrow. Spread the word on the Majority Report. Write the Majority Report on iTunes review. Write Two Dope Boys in a Podcast on iTunes review. Tweet at me about the meetup if you're interested in that. @ Michael Brooks. JustCoffee.coop. Fair Trade tea, coffee, or chocolate. All of the descriptions for all of the deals are always in the blog posts and on our sponsor page. So even if you're a member, you could still access them. We'll see you on the fun half, 646-257-3920. 646-257-3920. The IMs are open. Matt, what are you listening to, you cock? You. He is like, I am so happy that Matt is benign, because if he was not, there would have been so many office shootings. Actually, I wonder if I did a pool, I wonder who. Actually, honestly, I think Sam would be the most likely office shooter in this office.
Absolutely not.
You.
Are you kidding me? No.
Who would be most likely?
No, I mean-
Kelly.
No.
I would
because
actually legit would
I'm
vote.
too obvious. It's Matt. Because
I think
when-
Matt's pretty obvious. I think as soon as he said, I
no,
listened to
no.
everything at 5 times speed, I immediately started marking the exits.
No, when I
Not 5
when I
times.
was discussing
Exactly. Not 5 times.
when I
I'm
was
on my
discussing
list.
his Instagram picture, I was like, should I worry about how sad Matt is and, like where his mind is going, or
Not
should I
sad.
worry that he's gonna like be a lone wolf
More morbid.
shooter or something?
Kelly also worries that like I'm gonna get too drunk to find my way home at night. So
That's a separate issue.
Really?
But I would never shoot anyone. Oh my god.
Matt, my board. No, it's too late. It worked for a second if my board was up.
Look,
All right,
I
let
only
me.
worry that because it just happened one time, and then
I had a sketch once that I remember Reza was really into, Reza Aslan. It was like, and what I wanted to do is it would be like you'd have a shot, and it would be like, a guy from, probably like Pakistani background, a Muslim dude, and it would be set up. It would be like a video, like it was basically like one of those like homemade, like I'm about to do a suicide attack things. And what he would say in this video, though, is he would be like really clear that he loves America, that Islam condemns terrorism, and that the office shooting that he's about to do is because he fucking hates his office mates. And he would like really appreciate if he could participate in the American tradition of murdering the people you work with without it getting conflated with a religious issue. And he'd be like, I'm killing Andy in accounting, not because he's Jewish. In fact, Islam recognizes Judaism. We respect them. But Andy needs to go.
this
And
is
that-
taking
that
a
felt like a good
really
sketch.
dark turn.
Oh, it always takes
and
a
Michael
dark
just
turn.
blew one of his sketch ideas.
Well, I felt like it wasn't going to work in a Trump America. It's like, I feel like you could release a sketch like that now, and they'd be like, did you see that? There was a new assault. They released it. He said it.
That was perfect, Matt. That's Matt's like, fuck you.
That is Matt's fuck you. All right, you're calling from a 707 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from? Would you like to curse Matt out? Would you also like to take a pool on the office shooting?
Hello?
Or none of the above? Yes.
Hello?
What's your name? Where you're calling from?
I'm Logan. I'm calling from Sonoma.
Hey, what's up?
Love to curse that out.
Okay.
Actually, I'm calling to make the point that you were saying before that Democrats aren't as myopic and going straight for the issue as Republicans generally are. And I think one of the other things is they're not as good at disseminating what they're saying either. The cerebral thing really plays a part in that. And if you just look at the argument against abortion, it's basically, do you want babies to die? And you go, no. So then therefore you're anti-abortion. And Democrats just aren't willing to do that. When we're talking about climate change, we don't talk about how it's necessarily leading to starvation in World War III. We talk about how CO2 levels are rising.
Right.
When we talk about healthcare, we don't necessarily talk about the people that die without it or how it forces you to be stuck in a job and essentially healthcare is freedom.
Right.
We talk about, just really, really kind of off topic things. And we need to start doing more on the messaging side to tap into that reptilian brain and really kind of make it a message that always sticks with you, because that's what wins and that's what sticks with people. And again, I mean, on top of that, when you look at the
it's
debate,
not just the messaging though.
Trump and Clinton.
It's not just the messaging. It's also the policy, because I think a bunch of people got lost in like, and I don't have a problem with like Drew Weston or George Lakoff, but that all became about the framing cues and playing word games with people, which is important. The words you choose matter and how visceral they are matters. But part of the reason is like you have complex explanations because you devise complex policy, right? Like that's, and then on the other hand, actual Republican policy is just like, yeah, you're not going to have health care. Fuck you. But what they'll say in response is, look at this. This is totally complicated. We'll do something better. I mean, that's another thing that honestly, like, Trump is not that different from what came before. Paul Ryan essentially said a more wonkish version of, don't worry about it. It will be better. I mean, so when you combine convoluted policy that's hard to explain and your opponents are willing to completely lie about everything they're putting out and mislead. I mean, that's, that goes even beyond the sort of like framing and simplicity of language stuff.
Well, and Hillary Clinton even kind of supported Trump's argument that the ACA is bad policy, and so did Bernie Sanders, because she was like, well, there's problems, we have to fix it. But she never defined it by just saying, look, the price rates are going through the roof. The way to fix that is a public option because there's no profit margin, right? It
Right.
could be so simple. So I guess, yeah,
Yep.
I mean, what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. It would be simple. I got an
simplicity is
answer to
king,
that.
and that's where the message goes. So,
Even on that
yeah,
front, though,
for sure.
Bill Clinton literally made that point, and the thing that got pulled from that talk was him calling it a crazy system.
It's the craziest thing in the world.
Yeah.
Because subconsciously I want my wife to lose, and subconsciously I deeply resent Barack Obama. Yeah, I mean, Bill was a little rusty out there. It wasn't working. All right, man. Appreciate the call. Thanks, man.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay, let's do a little bit of sound. Let's get to Joe Scarborough. This is, I mean, Saturday Night Live really matters in a way that it probably never has before. They're talking about the Bannon thing. So there's some more sketch clips from that sketch in it. We'll get to the more serious stuff in a moment, but we're going to play Morning Joe talking about the controversy surrounding Steve Bannon, President Bannon, the Saturday Night Live sketch, and then after that we'll pretty quickly get to the McCarthy thing because that was extraordinary. All right, let's take a look.
Just another thing this weekend, Mika. This Steve Bannon thing just keeps coming up. People are saying President Steve Bannon. And we saw it on Time Magazine last week. I mean, what staffer have you ever known that is in the job for a week and a half and he's on the cover of Time Magazine? And, Mika, people and I have been coming up and we've been repeating over and over again, no, Donald Trump is the final decider. They're like, oh, no, it's Bannon, it's Bannon, it's Bannon. Tell us about Bannon, tell us about Bannon. And, Mika, we always tell them the same thing. It's not about Steve Bannon. It's about Donald Trump. But the media doesn't believe that. And now even staff members are saying that Bannon is. Well, Bannon even told the Times today, it was said that Bannon was rushing to his allies, saying that because of the chaos in the West Wing, that he and Miller only had a brief window to get his agenda through. And so that he's rushed into this power vacuum. Well, and then Saturday Night Live even picked up on it and made fun of the relationship where Steve Bannon's president of the United States and Donald Trump works for him. I think people have this backwards, but here's the clip.
Send in Steve Bannon.
Hello, Donald. I have arrived.
Hi, Steve. You look rested. I'm tired and cranky, and I feel like I could just freak out on somebody.
Then maybe you should call Australia.
No refugees. America first. Australia sucks. Your reef is failing. Prepare to go to war. Steve, I think that was bad. Was that bad?
No, it went just according to plan.
Whose plan? Your plan?
No, your plan.
Oh, okay, good.
Okay, Donald, that's enough fun for tonight. Can I have my desk back?
Yes, of course, Mr. President. I'll go sit at my desk. Yeah.
Wow.
So, Mika, this is, again, when we say Donald Trump is the decider-in-chief, he's the decider-in-chief, but that is not the story. Again, look at this Time magazine cover. Again, it's astounding that this soon into a new administration, and I don't know. I mean, maybe Bannon's calling all the shots. I still don't think he is, but I think Trump is the guy that calls the shots, but this is a theme that I guess needs to be investigated, because I've always told people you're obsessing. I always say, Mika, you're obsessing over the wrong story. That's not the story. The story is Trump and how Trump makes decisions.
Yes.
Okay, well, I think we are talking about how Trump makes decisions. He gets on his little desk and he lets Bannon take over the job. Now, what's important about Joe and Mika bloviating is that it leads to this tweet. Donald J. Trump, I call my own shots, largely based on an accumulation of data. And everyone knows it. Some fake media, and of course, fake news is all in bold letters in order to marginalize. Lies! So that means that Steve might be in danger. But before we actually get to the Melissa McCarthy thing, let's actually take a brief detour here. Or not a detour. Let's expand on Bannon. So that's one interpretation. And clearly Chris Christie emerged from his donut hole in Jersey to do this over the weekend, and he kind of praised Trump, but said that Trump was hurt by his staff on the travel ban and, is clearly trying to wiggle his way back into favor. So there's one expectation set is that, Trump is obviously crazy. He loves chaos. He loves firing people. He's, radically insecure. So Saturday Night Live sketches like that, a Time magazine cover, Bannon's on the chopping block. Okay, that's one interpretation. It's valid. But Jeet here wrote something over the weekend in the New Republic, which is a different take on it, and I'm concerned he might be right. Which is that, Steve Bannon, the title is Steve Bannon is turning Trump into an ethno-nationalist ideologue. And the argument here is that, okay, we know, obviously, that Donald Trump, when it comes to healthcare, he's all, everyone needs to have it. Now it looks like he's, on board with gutting it. But now, with O'Reilly, it might not happen until 18. Abortion. He doesn't care about abortion. Could care less, right? So there's one part of him, we know that he gyrates and lies and is all over the place and doesn't care. I'm sorry I said gyrate in the same sentence as Donald Trump. I apologize. I do feel a little ill myself. But there are consistent themes in his career of which the genesis of his campaign and what sustained his campaign came through. And those are certain forms of racial, ethnic animosity, misogyny, and this perception that America is being screwed by someone else. Japan, China. So, and of course, he used demonizing Hispanics, Muslims, speaking directly to the Republican base to skyrocket to the nomination. We had that brief period with Manafort early in the summer where, it was crazy because that was, the first wave of the Russia stories, and Manafort is obviously an incredibly scummy, sleazy guy. But you had this notion that, okay, this is going to be, it's not the A team, but we're going to do the B or C team of a normal-ish Republican campaign, as normal as it can be with an orange narcissist. But the pivot, right? And then that failed. That went away. Manafort got pushed out. And then Bannon came on. And Jeet here's point is look, the reason that Steve Bannon is so close to Trump is that it's not just, it's not a Kellyanne Conway thing. It's not a somehow he knows how to soothe Trump emotionally. I'm sure that's part of it. But that this is a guy who runs completely on instinct. He doesn't read and he doesn't think, but his instincts are protectionism, ethno-nationalism, racial animosity, and also, I would add, in addition to Jeet, tabloidism. So he has a guy who built a tabloid empire, which is what Breitbart is, who gives him the quote-unquote intellectual framework that congeals and solidifies his instincts on ethno-nationalist racism. And that means that Steve Bannon is a different figure. He's not just another yes man or another Svengali or another momentary affirmer of the Trump ego and soother of his endless insecurities. It means that he's the person who is giving architecture to his instincts. And that's, very seductive, because even Trump recognizes on some level that you need some frame or some strategy to actually do this. And the frame or strategy comes from the Bannon, Steve Miller, Jeff Sessions racist contingent, which gives weight but also confirms Trump's instincts. And I think that's a legitimate read, and it's very disturbing. And it congeal and it coalesces with what Trump's real passions are, which is Mexico's being disrespectful because he conflates his personal identity with national identity. This notion that people are being taken advantage of, and racism, right? Which I said before, and I'll just quote from the final graph of Jeet's piece. If so, Trump takes much pride in the fact that he's no ordinary politician. He's not beholden to the Republican Party, and that he's inspired a quote-unquote movement. Of course, that's mostly just a phantom and nonsense. He just spoke directly to the Republican base. If that's so, and it needs to be so in Trump's mind, because, of course, they're going to do the Republican congressional agenda with the added elements of overt bigotry like the Muslim ban. If so, then Trump needs Bannon, because Bannon is best equipped to take Trump's inchoate rudimentary instincts and turn them into a coherent political philosophy. The late Andrew Breitbart famously praised Bannon as the Leni Riefenstahl of the Tea Party. But now that Bannon is in the White House, the more apt Nazi comparison would be Joseph Goebbels, the ideologist and propagandist tasked with the essential work of giving ideological coherence to his leaders' rants and blabber. Goebbels was never fired, nor did he quit. He stayed at Adolf Hitler's side until the very end. That's possible. So I would keep up those hashtag President Bannon tweets, because I do think that's very astute. It's something we need to understand. I have no doubt that in the same way what convinced me that Donald Trump didn't read Mein Kampf was, of course he didn't read Mein Kampf. He doesn't read. His most profound and essential commitment is to his own ego. And if anybody is threatening that, it doesn't matter what the agenda is. So I do think that there's a way Bannon is eased out. Now, speaking of eased out, this guy's probably the most obvious pick for first person who will be fired in the Trump White House, the first person of sort of public note in the new administration. We've all seen Sean Spicer. He's a bizarre guy. He's someone who's clearly so uncomfortable in his own skin that he's uncomfortable to watch. He came out, his first press conference was that sort of anxiety-driven rage fest about the turnout. And Trump obviously forced him to do it because Trump was pissed, but then he did a terrible job. So Trump let it be known that he knew he did a terrible job. And then since then, he's just sort of settled into doing a kind of uncomfortable, he's so bad at it that he's like, you watch it and you're just like, dude, you got to watch Kellyanne Conway do this because you don't know how to lie like her. And the story is also that he subsists on gum, which he swallows, and his suits never fit. So Saturday Night Live, again, I have never in my life has Saturday Night Live ever had this level of relevancy, ever. This is ingenious. They got Melissa McCarthy to do an impression of Sean Spicer. And I would say that it totally captures the essence of Spicer, except to be honest with you, even in this impression, McCarthy has a little bit too much gravitas to say it really captures Sean Spicer. She's
Yeah.
a little bit too impressive. But this
She doesn't break.
She
ever.
doesn't break, and no matter how the makeup job and the costume is wonderful, but she doesn't have his beady little eyes scurrying around.
Yeah, Spicer has a small face,
right.
a two-dimensional face.
He's a two-dimensional face and big frame that doesn't fit in his suits. All those caveats aside, let's watch or listen to a couple minutes of this because this was genius.
Okay, so if nobody has any questions. Okay, we'll do a couple questions. Go. Glenn Thrush, New York Times. Boo! Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about the travel ban on Muslims.
Yeah, it's not a ban.
I'm sorry?
It's not a ban. The travel ban is not a ban, which makes it not a ban.
But you just called it a ban.
Because I'm using your words. You said ban. You said ban. Now I'm saying it
The
back
president
to you.
tweeted, and I quote,
Yeah.
if the ban were announced with a 1-week notice.
Yeah, exactly. You just said that. He's quoting you. It's your words. He's using your words when you use the words and he uses them back. It's circular using of the word, and that's from you. Seriously, Glenn? Are you going to start with this right out of the gate, Glenn? I mean, what do you want me to take my nuts out so you can get a better kick at them?
Okay, you had to have known that I would ask that question.
Okay, sit down, Glenn. Who here, just by show of hands, who here hates Glenn? Right? Everybody? 1, 2, 3, infinity? Now, see, let the record show that everyone raised their hands because everybody hates Glenn. So print that. That's your story. Next question, go.
Yeah, I would like to ask about Steve Bannon's role on the National Security Council.
Yeah, that's a dumb question. That's a stupid question. Sit down, Glenn.
My name is not Glenn.
I know your names. I'm just saying Glenn, like in a general Glenn. It's your word. It's your word. Next, go.
Yeah, I'm also concerned about Steve Bannon. A lot of people are saying he's the one behind this Muslim ban.
Yeah, all right, you guys still aren't getting it. You need some props? My word's too big. I got to show you in pictures. Great. Okay, here we go. When it comes to these
Pause it.
decisions.
This is not going to work, obviously, on audio. How much more is there? 15 seconds. Okay, you can play out the rest of it.
The Constitution gives our president lots of power, and Steve Bannon is
Something
the
big is
key
here.
advisor. Okay? And our president will not be deterred.
Okay. So yeah, you watch the YouTube for all the props that she was using there. I almost feel like, Sean, the whole goal of making you press secretary was to see how long it would take before Melissa McCarthy did an impression of you. Sorry it was so quick, buddy. You're fired.
Yeah, and the full things are worth it too.
Yeah, the full things are worth
Really
it. That
good.
was absolutely brilliant. Let me run through a couple of IMs. Pataki on the tacky. Michael, I work for a large medical company, and we recently had a huge sales meeting. The CEO overall said that the Trump presidency will be good for the company, although it may be volatile. It was pretty disheartening. Yeah. I mean, I think we talked about this actually in the Uber discussion for Two Dope Boys that's dropping tomorrow. And I think like business might, if they are compelled to, play a constructive role in resisting Trump. But, you know, the first instinct is quarterly cycles. They don't care. And that's a problem. And that's a good lesson to not put your faith in business.
We also don't know everything about that. And, a dramatic drop in
Yes. Dramatic drop in what?
morale at your company might make you want to tell people that it will
See,
be.
this is the whole point of the interview. We got to stop being like that. The whoever manager said that he should be keenly aware of the French Revolution.
Okay.
I'm just kidding. All hands on. Oh, dude, I'm not gonna do that. All hands on D. Wait, you just already. That's the same I am. I am Sock. I was worried that Trump may have died when he didn't tweet for about 15 hours, but it turned out he was just golfing. Producer Lauren. It's just a question mark. I don't know. George in Sull. Hi, Kelly, Matt, and Michael. Greetings from the UK. In the Parliament today, the Speaker of the House, John Bercow, declared that he will block Trump from addressing Parliament when he comes to his state visit. Quote, I would order questions for the Prime Minister. I would not wish to issue an invitation to President Trump. Our opposition to racism and to sexism and our support for equality before the law and an independent judiciary are hugely important in consideration in the House of Commons. Me and about 2 million people signed a petition to prevent him from entering the country, but we will be likely ignored by the powers that be. The protests when he shows up will be the biggest we've had in decades, and I'm talking Iraq war level protests. Any thoughts? Yeah. I mean, I think that it's actually very important. I think that as insular as many Americans can be, that actually does register. I think if you, there's sound coming from somewhere. I think if you say that, that story travels. I mean, you know, in 2012, when Mitt Romney went to London during the campaign and to Poland, I think, as well, he made an ass of himself. He insulted London's conduct in the Olympics, and top British politicians made fun of him, conservative British politicians. That hurt his campaign. Obviously, Trump's, base, they probably love the fact that he won't be invited to something as gay as the British Parliament. But I think in the sort of more, along the either whatever is left of the persuadable spectrum, just to the sort of sense of day in, day out, these people are dangerous and incompetent, which obviously they are. I think it helps. Comrade Biden, also floating an idea. If I write George Soros erotica, will you read it on air? Don't worry, it'll be tasteful. I cannot commit to that. Also floating an idea where Putin cucks Trump in a visit to Russia. Afterward, Trump retreats to the comforts of his daughter, Ivanka. I would read this on air, but is shocked when he finds that she is being bedded by a Joseph Stalin impersonator. Hit me up. I'm giving you gold here. Okay. So speaking of Putin, this was an interesting piece of sound. He was talking with Bill O'Reilly. Bill O'Reilly is basically trying to get to the Putin question. Why can't Trump criticize Putin ever? What's going on? What's the deal with Vladimir Putin? And this response that Trump had to the Putin question was, it was one of those great ideological snapshots that sometimes Trump delivers for everybody, because I think that it revealed where everyone was in a kind of amusing way. But let's look at Bill O'Reilly and Donald Trump.
Do you respect Putin?
I do respect him.
Do you? Why?
Well, I respect a lot of people. That doesn't mean I'm going to get along with him. He's a leader of his country. I say it's better to get along with Russia than not. And if Russia helps us in the fight against ISIS, which is a major fight, and Islamic terrorism all over the world, right? Major fight, that's a good thing. Will I get along with him? I have no idea. It's very
He's a
possible
killer,
I
though.
won't.
Putin's a killer.
A lot of killers. We got a lot of killers. Why, you think our country's so innocent? You think our country's so innocent?
I don't know of any government leaders that are killers in America.
Well, take a look at what we've done, too. We've made a lot of mistakes. I've been against the war in Iraq from the beginning.
Yeah, mistakes are different
We made
than...
a lot of mistakes, okay, but a lot of people were killed.
He's right. He's not wrong. And this is one of those moments, and I noticed that the reaction, there was this sort of like liberal outrage machine, which gets embarrassing. It's like, guys, we're supposed to be the critical thinkers here and have some awareness of history. Of course, coups, assassination. I mean, be real about American history. Then I saw the kind of tanky left be like, exactly, without realizing that there are some cultural subtleties here. And it's one thing to acknowledge the reality of what we've done. But when you have a president starting to overtly say, like, yeah, sometimes we kill people. Maybe we're not so much different than Vladimir Putin. That opens a certain door. So I think a lot of people were missing the mark with that interview on both sides of it. But he's not wrong. He's not wrong.
he's wrong that Putin does it. He poisons. I mean, he does it to his own people, and so for the president,
We've definitely killed our own people, for sure. I get. Look,
for the president to say it, it's just fucking stupid.
I don't know if it's. I mean, if he didn't,
true or not, it's just not
if
diplomatic in any way. It's so dumb.
Well, it actually was weirdly very diplomatic. I bet that goes over very well in Russia. No, I mean honestly, that actually is a
diplomatic
type of
is probably the wrong word. I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is that
decency, I think, is what you're
not
getting
decency,
at.
but that you have a certain responsibility to the American people to be more than just a person and be a sort of institution, which is on a large scale.
Well, that's
what he's
already
failing at.
obviously totally out the window.
I know
that,
but
I think that is as an example of him not performing that function is not as like if his response was, Bill, we got to clean up our own house here. I'm not denying that, but we can't go around acting like we don't have blood on our hands. That would actually be a profoundly honest and, if it was acted upon, incredibly progressive statement in foreign policy. And many, many countries, including allies, and including countries where I get your distinction. You're right. Putin, probably personally ordering hits on people. But again, I wouldn't.
Not only that, but jailing journalists and killing people.
That's another thing that we don't have a great track on as well.
Better than he does.
Sure.
There is a difference.
There's a difference.
And I don't have a problem with what Trump
think,
said, except for that I hate him already. So everything that comes out of his mouth is stupid to me. But
I'm on board with that. But I also think a lot of people, not just including many countries that in fact do have better human rights records than we do, and countries that we have directly led, like we haven't apologized to Indonesia. We haven't fully apologized to East Timor. We've sort of acknowledged Chile. We haven't, we're still killing many civilians with drones. And you know what? Yes, I doubt it's self-awareness, but he could have said, Bill, I just actually had a little American girl killed last week in a botched raid that I wasn't even properly planning for. We are not in a position to lecture anybody on these things until we improve our record, period.
So I suppose that I agree with everything that you're saying. I just think that the problem with him saying this is that if it were somebody else and it was that was saying the same thing and it was going to lead to a better, it was going to lead to actual progress. It was going to lead to discussion, change in policy.
Well, I agree.
That would be great.
But
it's not.
That's why.
So it's
that's
just
why
really
I didn't.
Crazy.
I don't know. Whatever. We're getting over semantics, but I agree with that. That's why I thought both responses were like. I thought there was a liberal pearl clutching, like, "Oh my God, how could you say that?" Which is stupid or historically illiterate or foreign policy illiterate. And then there was people on a certain part of the left that were like, yeah, exactly.
Right, yeah.
And it's like, right. But that's not a good thing. Nor is it a good thing when Russia does it. So what's your point?
Right. Jeet here pointed out that the difference between Donald Trump in this instance and Noam Chomsky, who makes this sort of point, is that Chomsky's saying this is awful and we need to do better. Trump is like, well, if we want to buy some plutonium or polonium or whatever it's called.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
Trump's like, I heard that he was a bad guy. Maybe he shouldn't have been in London.
Sorry, Glenn Thrush.
Sorry, Glenn Thrush. Maybe you're a child molester. I don't know. So, yes, that's a big, big, big difference. I agree with both of you on that. But I just think that it behooves us to make the argument for the...
in a smart way.
Yeah, let's not do pearl clutching. Let's not be like, oh, I can't believe that you... It's like...
Yes, I'm totally against pearl clutching. There's a lot of it going on.
I know. It's the same people who can't even watch it, can't even enjoy a good tape of Richard Spencer getting punched. Pearl clutching. Bertelmech, there's no Super Bowl. I don't know what the fuck y'all are talking about. The current champions are the Broncos, and MVP is Von Miller. Man, sure is nice to have the Broncos be champions in this year of our Lord 2017. If they're allowed to violate reality, so am I. At least I'm going low stakes. Go Broncos. Go back to the 19s and tell me that there's a difference between Putin and USA with regards to freedom and press assembly and political situation. Go ahead. I'll wait it. The 19s? I don't know what you're talking about, actually. You got to send a follow-up. There is a difference. Like, this is where, again, like, don't be dumb. Is there a drone assassination of American citizens? Did people go to jail for whistleblowing? Were Bush and Obama administrations terrible in those regards? Absolutely. It is different than what you see in Russia. Like, there is no need. There's an obsession across the ideological divide with false equivalencies. There's nothing difficult about recognizing that everything is bad and then making gradations. It ain't that hard. Sip. Am I the only one left felt happy when the Houthis hit Riyadh with a Scud missile? That had to be today's most satisfying moment. Chris Lepaco, did you see Ricky Gervais as Sean Spicer in SNL? He was pretty funny. I didn't see that. I think he might be making a joke. Yeah. All right. Let me take another call. You're calling from a 209 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from? 209. 209. Are you there? Going once. You're calling from a 401 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from? 401?
Is that 401?
Yeah, you're on.
Okay. You said 401, so I was confused.
Oh, well, I'm sorry. I apologize. 410. All right, go ahead. What's on your mind?
Hey, it's Ian in Baltimore.
Hey, Ian, what's up, man?
Just calling because you kind of tickled on one of my gripes about what's going on right now with this whole Putin and false equivalency bullshit.
Right.
And I'm so sick of seeing leftists who just can't who can't understand that there is a distinction between a pluralistic democracy that has problematic foreign policy and has an increasingly severe war on journalism, and a country that is an autocracy that has no press rights whatsoever, where journalists and even public officials are murdered when they disagree with the government. Like the idea that those are the same thing is ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't, and I think even the ways in which America, I might not be as optimistic about the state of our pluralistic democracy as you, and I think that obviously
I'm not optimistic.
This is a country. Okay, but this is a country that we could keep running down the list of apartheid, Jim Crow conditions, and criminal justice. Of we in fact are certainly an oligarchy. We're now headed towards some version of kleptocracy if the Trump organization does what it wants to do. And there's ceaseless assaults on public health. There's an expansion of inequality. I mean, all of these things and problematic foreign policy. But I agree with you that, even if you're just looking for a place to romanticize abroad, if you have that emotional need, like the Kurds, okay? Or, even when we were reflecting on Castro's legacy a couple weeks ago, it's undisputable that Fidel Castro did horrible things on human rights and had a very problematic record in many areas. It's also undeniable that he delivered great public benefits for Cuba, and it's also undeniable that he, in an incredibly small island, punched well beyond his weight in fighting anti-colonial, anti-imperialist struggles in Africa and Latin America. That's a complex figure. There's nothing complex about the modern Russian system. And if there's any conversation that people want to have about the United States and Russia, if your main strike zone always needs to be coming back to something that we have done wrong, it's really simple. We went in Russia after the Soviet Union collapsed, and we brought in shock doctrine. We brought in vicious neoliberalization policies, and we helped turn the victory over a totalitarian system, which was an incredible moment in human history and an inspiring moment of liberation. We turned that country into a gangster casino, and every type of Western interest imaginable profited off of it. In 1996, when Yeltsin was up for re-election, there's a Time magazine cover from that time. I think it's Yanks to the rescue. We sent in a political consulting team to help him secure his re-election because there already were lots of problems there with massive corruption. You had, party officials basically just going into the private sector, flipping public resources, and creating the sort of oligarchy that you see now, and then the oligarchy fused with the deep state and the intelligence elements, which is Putin. So, there's plenty of things that we can criticize the United States for with regards to Russia, but any conversation about Putin or Russian politics that sees it as anything other than a far-right autocracy that plays colonial and imperial games too, that viciously violates human rights, and the type of partnership that Trump is talking about is, for all intents and purposes, a merging of far-right white nationalists, reactionary governments to secure resources, violate human rights, and increase the petrochemical production of the world. So I think people need to wake the fuck up about that stuff and stop deluding themselves. It shocks me how dumb people can get about Russia on both sides, incidentally, because then we've got like the sort of like, liberals who all of a sudden sound like they're doing an RT segment themselves about Russia. Okay.
Oh, who are constantly quoting John McCain and Lindsey Graham.
Exactly.
Hey, do you remember these assholes are not on our side?
Exactly. But on the far left, the amount of justification, sympathy, and delusion about Putin and Russia never ceases to blow my mind. It's really not that complicated. It's a brutal autocracy that is trying to reassert its own particular zone of influence. It's pretty basic IR stuff, and they're pretty brutal, and they also have some pretty crazy thinkers that are pretty prominent in their foreign policy apparatus as well. If you don't like Trump, I don't understand why you'd like Putin. Maybe some of them secretly like both, in which case they should come out with it and acknowledge that we are not on the same side of this.
Well, there are left authoritarians. People, forget about that because of the sort of, I guess there's a lack of authoritarianism in a lot of the sort of the U.S. liberal left. It's more like corporatocracy, kind of, well, let's go get paid. But we kind of have managed to ostracize the left authoritarians from a lot of our discourse on our side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I don't understand. I know that people will come in and be like, "Who's pro Putin?" And I don't think you can find many people that are pro Putin, but I think you can certainly find people, and I'm not going to go down a list of names who I would say bend over backwards in a way that they never like. The equivalent of the type of analysis they do with Russia is like, people who just simply can't or won't or always are looking for a justification for U.S. or Israeli behavior. And if you saw that and it wasn't applied to Russia, you'd call bullshit on it. So I don't get it. All right, man, I appreciate the call.
Thanks for your insight.
All right, bye-bye. I wanted to ask that guy if he was the guy that did the Sam Harris impression. Love that Sam Harris impression. All right, let's do some more sound. Republicans across the country are running away from their constituents. And why are they running away from their constituents? Well, because they, as Kelly says, I wish you said that on mic.
Because the constituents want to kill them?
Well, I was actually thinking because they want to kill their constituents by getting rid of Obamacare.
Yeah, that's why the constituents want to kill them.
Right, so that's why the constituents are upset in this metaphorical killing talk. But literally, constituents are showing up not to kill anybody, but to yell at them and say, hey, can you not put my life at risk by getting rid of what really is just a basic consumer protection law in some respects. That's actually what Obamacare is. This is Congressman Tom McClintock. He represents a kind of rural part of California. We think of California as a very democratic state, but there still are some agricultural Republican districts. So it's very impressive that in this kind of turnout, happened. This is something you'll have to watch on YouTube if you're listening, but let me just describe. He's literally scurrying out of a town hall, surrounded by security. Again, nobody's I mean, maybe verbally they are, but visually nobody's threatening him. They're protesting. Some people are yelling. They want to talk to him, but nothing physical is happening. And he will not face his constituents and explain to them why he wants to jeopardize their lives. And there he is. And this needs to happen every single day, every week. This is one of the most best images that have happened in 2017. And this is perfect. And they keep going. And a woman's trying to hand him a leaflet. Security rush him into the black SUV, close the door, and guns it. Guns, gonzo. Sirens blaring. Great image, by the way, when you won't talk to people about taking away their health insurance to get into a Suburban speed off. Good call. So that's happening all across the country. There's a congressman in Illinois who had to run out as well. And let me just tell you something. These things work. I had a Majority Report subscriber from New Jersey who told me, I'm sure this was a very sophisticated letter, but she wrote a smart, respectful, but highly critical letter to Booker and Menendez. Last week, not in Menendez's case, not the same kind of response. She had a 20-minute phone call with Cory Booker's chief of staff based off of that letter. So that kind of interaction matters a lot. Stay in their faces. Stay on the streets. Now, Donald Trump is, of course, skittish as hell when it comes to healthcare because he's all over the place on it. And, he does have some instincts. And it doesn't take amazing instincts to recognize that kicking 20 million people off of their health care is not a popular thing to do. He knows it needs to be lied about. He knows it needs to be massaged. But the voices and the protests are amplifying. So here he is with Bill O'Reilly. Remember when he said at his press conference with all the binders, and why he's a germaphobe, so he would never be peed on. Remember that from a couple of weeks ago? He said that there was going to be an Obamacare replacement like so fast you wouldn't believe it. As soon as Price is confirmed. Now, of course, Tom Price doesn't even know about this supposed plan. We'll see. They're definitely still angling to destroy it. The message is coming through. The pressure needs to keep being applied. This is Donald Trump talking with Bill O'Reilly about health care.
2017, can Americans expect a tax cut?
I think so, yes. And I think before the end of the year, I would like to say yes.
Okay. Can Americans in 2017 expect a new health care plan rolled out by the Trump administration this year?
Yeah, in the process, and maybe it'll take till sometime into next year, but we are certainly going to be in the process. Very complicated. Obamacare is a disaster. You have to remember, Obamacare doesn't work. So we are putting in a wonderful plan. It's statutorily takes a while to get. We're going to be putting it in fairly soon. I think that, yes, I would like to say by the end of the year, at least the rudiments, but we should have something within the year and the following year.
All right, last.
What's that? Okay. Look, so it's verbiage. It's nonsense. There is the Republican plan is slash people's health care. Get rid of protections. If you wanted to do healthcare expansion and protection in a center-right way, what's that plan? Obamacare. Period. They don't have, and the plan they do have is to just gut it. But they're seeing the dangers of that. And incidentally, this is another great example of how Donald Trump mirrors the rest of the Republican Party and the irresponsibility, the lies, and the obfuscation is part and parcel of the Republican Party's strategy on Obamacare since the very beginning. We're going to play a brief montage that HuffPost put together of Republicans going back to 2010, all of the main players, Paul Ryan, Donald Trump, all of these assholes, basically saying on relentless message discipline. It's a catastrophe. It's going to be repealed. And, you know, it's going to be replaced with something.
Real change begins with immediately repealing and replacing Obamacare.
I don't want to repeal everything.
We want to start over, as we've said.
Repeal Obamacare. We need to act on this while the Senate's debating the reconciliation package.
We're going to repeal this bill when we win back a conservative majority in the House.
Commit to try to repeal this thing over the next year or two.
Repeal and replace.
I want to make sure that this health care bill never, ever, ever is implemented.
His health care law, my guess is he's not going to agree with us, and we're not going to agree with him on that, and that one might just go to the next election.
You say we're going to get rid of this, and then at some point we'll deal with it.
Listen, I've already outlined. We believe there's a better way.
What specifically are you going to do to provide universal coverage to the 30 million people who are uninsured?
That is not the issue.
The House has already voted some 30 times to repeal or defund this law. What's one more
And we're
going to
do it one more time.
I say we're going to replace Obamacare, and I'm replacing it with my own plan.
Obamacare is the law of the land. Listen, our goal here is not to shut down the government. Our goal is to cut spending and to stop Obamacare.
We need to pass a one-year delay.
I intend to speak in support of defunding Obamacare until I am no longer able to stand.
It's important for us as a party, especially in an election.
So we get it. So that's going back from 2010. And of course, they always did have the replacement in mind, which is nothing. But they're seeing the consequences of that now because I do think, as they say, this is they caught a car that they didn't expect to catch. Let's briefly, we'll get into the judge's stay on the Muslim ban. And we have, this is more sound that will open up this conversation. You have that from the hearing, Matt? I don't see it on the list. Yes. But I need a description of it. All right, so can you describe it? Okay. Forget it. It's fine. So over the weekend, there had been stays on specific aspects of the Muslim ban, but a judge in Seattle basically put a hold on the whole program and took a really unprecedented and sort of broad step in the circuit court against this ban. You know, usually there's a lot of latitude, and this is obviously what the Trump people are arguing for, presidents around what they're framing as a national security issue. Obviously, we've seen that, and it's ridiculous to frame it that way. I'm going to quote briefly from the New York Times. Many trial judges around the country have blocked aspects of Mr. Trump's executive order, but none have issued an order as broad as the one by Judge James Robert, a federal judge in Seattle, who blocked key parts of the executive order, which has suspended travel from 7 countries and limited the nation's refugee program. The case is now before the United States Appeals Court for the Ninth Circuit in San Francisco. That court on Saturday declined to issue an immediate stay of Judge Roberts' order, which means, of course, that it will stays in order. But it indicated it would weigh on it soon after additional briefs are filed, with the last one due Monday afternoon after it rules an appeal to the Supreme Court seems likely. I'm just quote briefly from Justice Roberts now. Federal courts, that was from the brief, But I mean, he basically said, and I don't have this in front of me, I apologize, that the ruling brought into play basic questions of protection of minority rights and constitutional fairness, and agreeing with the plaintiffs that this can't just be sort of slotted into that latitude category that one might give presidents in conducting foreign affairs. Now, of course, the other aspect of this is that this is the first kind of major judicial rebuke of the president's agenda, and he responded to it in exactly the way you'd expect him to respond. I cannot believe that judge would put our country into such peril. This is Trump. And he also referred to the so-called judge in the case. If something happens, blame him and the court system. Now, Mitch McConnell said on CNN, we all get disappointed from time to time, but I think it's best to avoid criticizing judges personally. Now, this is a political a side point, but we know that when Trump was demonizing a judge dealing with his fraud cases back during the campaign and talking about him being from Mexico, and that's why he wasn't fair to him, who still endorsed Donald Trump and worked to make sure he was elected president, even if they condemned it? Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan. But it's a very significant ruling that we'll continue to tease out because it marks a sort of much more radical break than a couple of specific stays, and it sort of the directive from Department of Homeland Security is that that new level of scrutiny is not operative right now, and programs need to be restored. So it's significant, and courts, protest, and targeting business are the sort of pillars of resistance, and it's been a fairly effective couple of weeks, so they need to continue, and there needs to be even more intensity. Bernie Sanders was on Jake Tapper talking about Donald Trump, and of course, Wall Street. See, this is another area of like what concerned me with Steve Bannon as well, and Bhaskar Sankar and I talked about this before Trump was inaugurated. The disturbing thing about Bannon was, does he fuse his racism, his ethno-nationalism, and his cruelty with a perceptive understanding about the corruption of Wall Street and the anger of people about how corrupted our system is? And there was sort of speech that he gave at the Vatican that indicated that he had a sort of fusion of those views. And we'll go to Marie Le Pen in a bit, and she genuinely is sort of synthesizing a ethno-nationalist, bigoted campaign with some very clear and robust critiques of neoliberalism and increased inequality. So then that was the sort of danger that many of us were identifying in the beginning, which is that what if Trump is popular through economic populism? But what we've seen so far is that they intend to keep the promises that are the worst, the Muslim ban, and of course Ryan and all the other Republicans will look the other way on it, and they'll maybe issue some, sort of gentle criticism, although not Ryan. He didn't. He backed the ban. And then in exchange, we get the Republican congressional agenda: make America poorer, sicker, and dumber, and give the corporate sector whatever they want. And that, of course, includes ripping apart, forget reinstating Glass-Steagall, an actual serious, robust regulation so Wall Street doesn't endanger the economy. Let's get rid of even the modest reforms that the Obama administration put in place. That's the top priority. Trump has, of course, come out, and they're going to move forward with getting rid of Dodd-Frank, and Bernie Sanders was asked about this by Jake Tapper.
I have to say this, Jake, and I don't mean to be disrespectful. This guy is a fraud. This guy ran for president of the United States saying, Donald Trump, I'm going to take on Wall Street. These guys are getting away with murder. Then suddenly he appoints all of these billionaires. His major financial advisor comes from Goldman Sachs, and now he's going to dismantle legislation that protects consumers. This is a guy who ran for president saying, I'm the only Republican. I'm not going to cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And then he appoints all of these guys who are precisely going to cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. So I hope that all of those folks who voted for Mr. Trump because he thought that he would stand up for working people, man, this guy is, he's a good showman. I will give you that. He's a good TV guy. But I think he's going to sell out the middle class and the working class of this country, and that business on Wall Street. He told us, in fact, it's in the Republican platform, he is going to bring back Glass-Steagall. We're going to be dividing up commercial banks from investor banks from insurance companies. Then he has all of the big Wall Street guys on his side, and now he's working for Wall Street.
That matters to the whatever chunk that we've decided it is. If there are 4 or 5 million people that voted for Donald Trump and were still very wrongly, first of all, they trusted him, which is crazy. and then wrongly willing to overlook the xenophobia, racism, and misogyny, but they were focused on the message of the system is rigged. That's the perfect message. Unfortunately, you got conned by a liar.
I just wanted to say that they misspelled the Chiron. They inverted the A and the L in regulations. That's all.
Oh. Nice, CNN. You guys are doing a great job. See, that's why I don't watch fake news.
Yeah, fake Chiron writers.
Fake Chiron writers. Disgusting.
Oh my gosh, I feel like I just did what I was complaining about when I came in. Sorry, Chiron writer.
It's okay. It's all right. Whenever you work in media, you have a lot of morons who are telling you how to do your job. I mean, it's true. It's all love. Okay, now Bernie has also had an unexpected impact on the world of global fashion. Jake Tapper asked him about that as well. Let's check it out.
Ask you as a closing question about something that is admittedly rather frivolous. I want to ask you about this bizarre sighting at Paris Fashion Week from Balenciaga. Take a look. These are a number of people, models on a runway in Bernie clothes. Did you ever think that you would become a fashion icon?
No, not quite, Jake. I think of my many attributes, being a great dresser is, or a fashion maven is not one of them.
Well, apparently there's a designer out there who begs to differ. Senator Sanders, thank you.
That's great. I mean, it really shows you the brand of what people are finding appealing today is radically different.
Well, we don't really have like army fatigues or any sort of revolutionary attire of the moment, really. It's like they're sort of Bernie t-shirts maybe,
Yeah.
but there's no like uniform. I feel like we should get like uniforms.
You would.
I don't think that it's necessarily that frivolous. I mean, okay, that looks ridiculous.
Who said it was? Oh, Jake said it was.
Yeah,
frivolous.
Jake Tapper said it was.
Well, I think what he knew is
But-
that Bernie's Bernie's in a good mood there, but they could have just easily been like, "Oh, people who are going to lose their homes, and you're asking me about
Right.
fashion." You know, that could have happened.
But, you know, especially because high fashion like that, the people that pay attention to it are not Bernie supporters, most likely. I mean, maybe in other countries,
They're
but
Hillary supporters.
Yeah, they're Hillary.
possibly. But, you know, I mean, it's.
I love
worth
the new collection. I wish I was the first woman
Everyone
president
who
so
can
I
afford-
could kill Yemenis.
Everyone who can afford off the runway Balenciaga is.
But the designers and the people in the creative process could definitely be Bernie supporters.
It is interesting though.
Absolutely
Like,
no, but that's what
Yeah.
they're putting out
No, I
there.
got
and
what
they're-
you're saying. No, I
you know
agree.
what I mean? That's what's available
Hey,
to people who want that
co-host
that
two Dope
brand.
Boys.
Yeah.
I totally buy the importance of culture. I'm with you. I just think
Way to sneak it in there.
Yeah. Twice a week, Cultural Insights, Two Dope Boys in a podcast. You're calling from a 209 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Michael, it's Majed from Stockton. How are you?
Hey, Majed, how you doing, man? I'm doing good.
Good, good. So on Friday, a caller mentioned that Jimmy Dore was talking about Sam or something like that. So I checked out that weird, like awkward live comedy show, whatever he does, and it was pretty stupid. He was just kind of like gloating about being so-called right about like now that all these people are protesting, saying, "Oh, look at everyone so awake." It's like, no, he's still fucking up the country. Like, it's not like nothing is fucking deteriorating under him. So I don't know. He said something about I don't care about sports or something when I don't know. It was really stupid, and he just had a bunch of yes men on stage. And
Yeah, I mean, look, dude, let me like make a couple of points here because I feel like it will keep coming up. I always say, like, the reality is that on a personal level, Jimmy was always really good to me. I had a great time when I hosted him on the show. We would debate a little bit because I always thought he was completely wrong about this election. But I enjoyed, I think the bit that we did about Tony Blair was hilarious, and I had a lot of fun with him. I was on his show, met him, all of that stuff. So, there's an element. Let me just finish. So there's a point that is not it's not enjoyable for me to go over Jimmy's an idiot, blah blah blah. I don't know about all that shit. But what I can say is that, yeah, I mean, he is wrong. And, there's an audience that, unfortunately, I think they have the right instincts, and I understand the anger, and I get the disgust, but they do not have a historical, strategic, grounded view of politics. And there are things that might work out paradoxically, like it might be maybe best case scenario in 4 years, the energy that has been used to attempt to save things and preserve the status quo, which is all this is. There's no forward momentum, and that's clearly the part he does not seem to get. Maybe in 4 years, maybe in 2 years, maybe that energy just keeps getting pushed and it goes. And it goes towards we need single-payer universal health care. It goes towards we need to break up the banks. It goes towards we need, zero carbon by 2030, right? Like the real stuff we need to do. But right now, all that's happening is that we're in a total catastrophe and people are reacting. And you're right. We're at JFK not saying it's a travesty that the United States does not accept more refugees. And we're calling on the administration that we might have some influence over to improve our refugees programs or give more money to Jordanians, Lebanese, to build better conditions, right? We're not doing that. We're basically saying we had a modest program and this is our Constitution, and we're fighting like hell to preserve it because there are ethno-nationalist racists in the White House. That's not forward momentum. And I think that people got fixated irrationally on Hillary Clinton. I mean, I'm clearly not a fan of hers. Bernie, in my view, was the obvious choice on strategic and moral grounds, but he lost. I don't believe in the fucking conspiracy theories. And the choice between Hillary and Donald Trump is the choice between, a not great, not particularly nutritious meal and, drinking cyanide. It's, so I think that it's important to the extent Jimmy is promoting things that are wrong and counterproductive, I'll, support pointing that out. But I don't. I have no appetite to get into the personal aspect of it. I do. I find it sad. Sucks. I wish Jimmy wasn't driving that car into a cliff, and I still like him, even if he hates me. So that's what it is.
Yeah, I just didn't understand the joke, though, that he made.
Oh, I don't know, dude. I'm sorry. That was really funny. I just went on a 6-minute soliloquy, and you basically are calling to explain a Jimmy Dore joke to you. I don't know. I didn't see the video.
No, I know. I get what you mean.
Yeah.
I get what you mean. No,
Yeah.
I was listening the whole time. I get what you mean. But I just didn't understand what his joke meant about, I'm not interested in sports or whatever. I don't know if you watched it.
I didn't watch it. I have no idea. And if Jimmy wants better Sam material, he can always call me. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no. I all right.
I'm just kidding. Yeah, and I wish, I mean, we could all move forward better if Jimmy could acknowledge the catastrophic miscalculation of supporting Jill Stein and looking for, this notion that what's happening is a vindication is not. It's people are in a complete emergency situation trying to preserve things. This is not forward momentum. It might turn into forward momentum, but it's still going to mean a lot of unnecessary human suffering. And the thing would have been why couldn't we have done this if Hillary was elected? Why not? Why couldn't we have said, actually, your student loan forgiveness package you put together sucks. It doesn't go far enough. See you on the streets. You would have had an administration that would have needed to take meetings with every single person organizing. And you know what? You wouldn't have had the milk and toast liberal types out. That's true. But guess what? Like, persuading them and getting them on the right side is a long process anyways. Like, that, yeah, milk and toast liberals are out, or whatever the right term is. Like, Hillary supporters are out on the street, again, because we're fighting a fundamental danger, not because all of a sudden they've realized that we need to have radical redistribution. So, whatever, it's the same point again and again. I don't know about the joke, and, hopefully things will improve. Thanks for the call, man.
Surely there
Bye-bye.
is.
Surely there is need. I do declare. Yeah.
Talking like that.
Surely.
Surely there is
Yes.
someone other than Jimmy Dore who is doing similar things to Jimmy Dore that we could sometimes talk
Yeah,
about on the
but
show.
our audience doesn't cross over as much with those people.
I don't talk about Jimmy Dore at all. People ask me, but
Jimmy Dore comes up because our audience crosses over. With
and
theirs.
I
That's
could, and
simple.
I have no, and coming across. Well, I'll tell you why Jimmy's more frustrating for me, because I actually have liked and appreciated a lot of things Jimmy has said and done. Other people that I've seen come on the scene making kind of similar arguments are so they're morons. I have nothing to say about them. The only thing I could say, I made fun of that guy that did the rating system thing, and then somebody told me that he was like 15, and I felt bad. So I stopped talking about him, okay? And honestly, there are people that I'll just, that there's something or other progressive lady. I just, I watched a couple minutes of one of her videos last summer. I mean, okay.
It's a market for confirming what you want to be.
Yeah,
the state of
and I
affairs.
think, and that's another distinction. Like, how do you, it's some of there's a weird overlap with some of the Sam Harris cult, and I still think, obviously, I think Harris and Rubin and all of that garbage is way worse and way more dangerous. But I think that there is this. There are these silos, and people just want constant reconfirmation, and that's not an argument. And I think what we try to do here is actually have a balance of rallying the troops, making the moral case, but also describing the world as it is, so as we can get it to where we want it to be. But you can't skip the as it is part. Okay. Epish. I hear one more ostensibly left writer saying national right to work will be good for labor unions because they're just establishment shills. I've never heard anybody say that. That's so stupid. Honestly, MR Crew, why do people who claim they're Marxists, they're so anti-union? It's because they're just rich kids who never had to rely on a union to put food on the table. Mike might be one answer to this because he might run in these circles. I don't have people, including the most trust fundy of Marxists, who are anti-union. And it certainly was not my experience growing up. I grew up without food on the table sometimes. Tush and Haynes, why not schedule a hearing to find out more about the best special operation that Trump ordered? I agree. Staten Island Mike, thank you for hammering home Bannon's savviness. Clinton Cash and Bannon's GAI is the story of the election. Yes, it's significant. Yes, the campaign was inept. Yes, the professionals at the DNC are rank amateurs, but the wound was only self-inflicted that everyone was suddenly willing to swallow the pills. That's right. The DX Fool, wait, Mr. International can't pronounce quinoa and Pakistan correctly? Oh, wait, can pronounce quinoa and Pakistan correctly. I was going to say I do. But not udon or udon? Okay, how about, no. Who cares? I'm not doing this. And yes, I can't pronounce karaoke because that's one of the only word that you listed that I can't pronounce. Sam can't pronounce practically his own name. And you're giving me a problem. Ivana Tinkle, the whole interview gave me just one thought I've been experiencing with everyone who's overly optimistic. Why We should give him a chance. I'm telling them, enjoy your glass half full of fascist urine when you have no safety net to speak of. I'm surprised I have hair left. I can't believe that you have friends that are saying that to you. To give him a chance. I mean, I thought we were at least beyond that point.
Yeah, cut them out of your social group.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the only thing that I've heard recently that has disappointed me from a few, I heard like one person in the legal profession kind of be like, well, Gorsuch is a great jurist. It's like, okay, I guess we should have,
Well, even Tribe said that. He's like,
right, but he still said we needed to oppose him.
Right, but it's just not even about that.
It's completely incidental. It's utterly irrelevant. Gorsuch could be the greatest attorney in the history of humanity, and he still shouldn't be confirmed. Many people careful trying to get home drunk in NYC. I woke up in Chappaqua once. Oh, really? Hope you weren't drinking too hard.
Matt will be fine. I'm just a worrier.
Come on over to my house.
Probably he will be fine.
I don't know. Matt needs to get more on the ball. Hi, Martha. Hi, Michael. With so much happening in just a few weeks, I wonder how the hell we survive years of this crap. Wish I could meet up with you. Two Dope Boys really inspires me. Thanks a million. Well, if you are in NYC, tweet at me, and we'll figure it out. Or you can always email me through my contact, michaeljamalbrooks.com. Dolink, C-SPAN 2, now Senate debate on DeVos, vote tomorrow. I think she's going to get through with Pence tie-breaking vote. Play clip of Franken and Sessions hearing, brilliant masterpiece. CPW, did Sam or you guys take the time to watch the Door video that I Amber mentioned Friday? Nah, come on, I already went through all this. Barron Trump. Yeah, Matt is a great athletic supporter. All right, let's do. What more sound do we have left here? Is there more sound that I didn't get to? What? We've done it all. Okay, great. Oh wait. I thought you had. I thought you had footage from Romania. You don't? Okay. All right. Good job, Matt. Well, I got a lot. I've got great footage from Romania. All right, let's race through these IMs. Okay.
It's with the footage of Muslims supporting 9/11.
Nick from Manitoba. We'll pick letters. Great show today, Michael. Your in-depth commentary reminds me of a young Walter Cronkite taking on the voice of a nation. More importantly, great job keeping it interesting the first half. I don't have to switch over to the fucking View to stay intellectually stimulated for once. Lastly, what I love about Mondays is getting to hear you, Kelly, and Matt playing some complex three-way ping pong. And will Matt and Kelly ever have their own segment? That'll be cool. Stay sweet, MR beauties. Max and I am. Breitbart outperforming Google. Meanwhile, the dumb left keeps shooting off us in the fucking foot by declaring nothing good enough. Jill Stein 2020 cuck joke. Jill Stein is actually someone who brings out way more anger in me. She is just fucking useless. I feel like she was like created in like a CIA lab to like simultaneously discredit the left and help elect the right. Also, stop portraying President Bannon as the Grim Reaper and show him as a piss-stroke drunk he is. Well, that's more like how I do it.
I like the Grim Reaper thing, though. I think that gets through the normies.
I think that's a normie move and good use of the word normie. But I'm much more like he's the fucking city of Baragida.
The Thucydides.
These Thucydides have to because the Muslims, we don't have martial spirit anymore. My fucking ex-wife, bitch. That's what it all comes down to. I have to say, like, everybody just got to read a little bit of Freud, a little bit of Wilhelm Reich, a touch of Marx. Read other things, but I'm just saying, like, I can't. How can you look at someone like Steve Bannon and just think it's anything other than like deep psycho-emotional sexual pathology that drives that guy? I mean, what else could it be? He's a rich layabout who cashed in, wrote junk screenplays, and then got subsidized to edit an online tabloid. And instead of like kicking back in LA and soaking like a walrus in a pool, He needs to worm his way to like the top of American politics to like inflict mass suffering and danger. That when he could literally just be sitting in Malibu is a deep problems there.
I wonder how many, you see the explosion of like people with extreme amounts of wealth of the past 30 years, how many of them end up turning into like a sort of Bannon type where they have all this money and they just get radicalized and want to take over the world. Like one of them's bound to hit, right?
Well, I think that that's true. And I think that it's another great example of like money doesn't mean anything other than either you've inherited it or you have skill in making money. But like the same like weird guy that you might run into at the bar or whatever, and you're just like, what the fuck is the matter with that guy? Might be a guy who's worth $50 million and have some pretty strong views about the world and actually know how to operate. Spicer's like a failed PE substitute teacher. Yes. Lawn Chair Media. We have to figure out that extreme vetting means yet. I imagine it involves an army of shirtless bros in flat bill hats screaming, yo, you a Muslim, bro? As a refugee walks on the tarmac. This operation could lead to any numbers of douchebags from Donald Trump Jr. to General Flynn's son. Yeah, I think General Flynn's son would be good for that. Like, Dad, vetting. Crapo Zappo. I heard NPR are having their discussion about why they didn't use the word lie when talking about Trump and the rest. We can't read their hearts, and we see intent, they say. It's infuriating. That is infuriating.
Who did they say was
This is
saying
NPR.
that? Yeah.
It's infuriating that mainstream news can't say either they're lying or they're incompetent. Instead, they insult our intelligence with bold-headed, navel-gazing argument about what it is.
Yeah. I think the obvious counter-argument is that we should be able to expect that the President of the United States is aware of just general fact in the world. So if you consistently go against that, you are lying.
Yeah, I mean, it's, and it also just shows how unequipped the sort of like middle brow technocratic culture of America is in dealing with gangsterism. Like you have a group of people who will, who say themselves alternative facts. And then on some like a Gus site, they're sitting around being like, well, I don't know. I don't know. It's what's in his heart. It's embarrassing. Jay-Z, I don't know. I found the wiggly Chris Christie mental image more offensive than gyrating Donald Trump image. Fair enough. What's the difference between being a killer and formalizing and directing assassination complex? There is absolutely a difference between a drone program which again, can I please, before we get the freak out and the tweets, I criticized Obama's drone program in real time, signature strikes, the intelligence, all of it. But if you don't understand the distinction between I'm going to authorize a limited operation that might, in fact, kill somebody who is in a group that is actively seeking to harm civilians versus that journalist, she's annoying, pop her in the head in the middle of Moscow. That's a difference. Now, it doesn't mean the drone and assassination conversation doesn't need to happen. It isn't important, but drawing an equivalency between those two things is just utterly wrongheaded. Mr. Fan, would Trump make America a party state either way? There needs to be would Trump make America one party state either way? There needs to be regime change in America. I think we need to just keep doing exactly what we're doing, and they're more off of their game than you might realize. Geek Wonk, Michael, there seems to be an instinct on the show to steer away from conflict with the left. You do great interviews like today's, picking apart the thought process of moderate Democrats, but it feels like Sam is too busy convincing himself to have conflict with the dumb left on Twitter, so we all get outbursts of anger about Jimmy. Shouldn't we be talking right now about how to systemically combat this insistence on ignorance? I don't really understand the angle you're coming from.
I think we talk about this kind of a lot.
I think so too. But I also don't even understand which part. I'm not reading it correctly. Is he saying that we should
talk about it more?
Talk about it more?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what more can we say? I also think honestly, with regard to the dumb left conversation at this point, I think that if I think it's like every other faction of politics. I think the persuadables have been persuaded. And again, there's also
Most Bernie supporters voted for Hillary.
vast majority of Bernie supporters voted for Hillary. I love Sarah Palin. To me, Trump comes off as someone who watched an 80s documentary, saw Reagan, and said, hey, I could do that too. He's also mad he didn't get the Reagan coronation on day one. Yeah, I think that's true. All right, Kelly. Number? Or letter?
N.
Nathan Ray. Heard the news from the UK. Yep, Parliament. John Bercow said Trump will not be invited to speak to joint houses during his state visit. That's awesome. Matt.
J.
Jimmy Reefer Cake. Michael, you know so much. If I gave you a list of countries, could you easily rate them on a human rights scale? How about Saudi Arabia versus Russia? I don't understand the purpose of this. I mean, they both have horrible human rights records. Saudi's probably worse. And I understand that we support Saudi Arabia, which I oppose. I also oppose Russian human rights violations. Done. Regarding Jimmy Dore's buddy joke about Sam, I don't remember it, but it was hilarious. Okay, cool.
Must have been pretty funny.
Sounds really funny.
So funny I forgot it.
Yeah, all right. Dick Dastardly. Does anyone actually know what Jimmy Dore said about Sam? No. Comrade Kelly is definitely the killer in the office. She's going to be so fed up with you assholes not valuing her opinion that one day she'll come in and stab all of you cucks to death with a kitchen knife. No, apparently you're wrong, Dick Dastardly. But that was also very cuckish of you, trying to curry favor like that. Jude, it's sad that the reporters on SNL and the sketch show better unity about follow-up questions. That's true. One reporter gets shut down, so the next continues. Yeah, that was my question. What about Bannon on the Security Council? That's a good point. Matt.
B. C.
Callous Whisperer. I'm so tired of everyone saying that whatever Trump or the GOP does is shocking, unbelievable, and wow. No, it isn't. I agree with you completely. Too many people keep expecting the GOP to be sane and reasonable. They never will be, and we should treat them accordingly with scorn, no respect, and highlight that their normal is fucking nuts. I agree. Colin Doucet. I didn't get to him okay. Trump. Frederick Douglass dropped the most amazing hip-hop album. Very underappreciated. It's true. I'm gonna celebrate Noam Chomsky's birthday instead of Christmas this year. I'm taking note from Captain Fantastic. That's a great movie. Great leap forward. Kelly, you're right. Foreign policy and domestic political assassinations are different. I also agreed with that, dude. The left attacking Putin is the right strategy. This is really hurt by that. Didn't the guest just say that progressives are too compliant to the rights weaving narrative? Sargon of a fraud. The tankies are wild. They think the enemy of your enemy is always your friend. That's true. And I'm hopeful. Let me see. All right, I'll give you one, Jay. Young Walter Cronkite, Schlurp once. Walter Cronkite was a fucking war correspondent. Your competition is The View.
Yeah, slightly bigger audience too.
Yeah, slightly. DC, Michael, we need to stop talking about or even to these persuadables. Trump voters are not going to move except to solidify more for Trump. There were tens of millions who didn't vote or didn't even register to vote due to a weak Dem voice. We need them in 18. I agree. We need a relatively small number. Sherrod Brown, Sherrod Warren, or Warren Sherrod. I don't know. We'll see. I'm actually not counting out a Bernie re-up. Censor Sweep, who on the far left is pro-Putin. Well, it's not. I'm not going to get into a list. As I said, I've already said my thoughts about this. I've mostly seen U.S. sucks too argument. Yeah, which I think gets really dumb and simplistic. Not that it directly applies to Russia. I saw a lot of people boiling it down to how toxic American exceptionalism is. Well, that's a different conversation. I agree with that. And that does America more harm than national morale boost it engenders. And final two numbers here. Final two letters. Give me one.
T.
Give me another one.
R.
All right, I'm just going to say A squared really quickly. A squared, Michael, glad you played that clip with O'Reilly. Glad to caution folks that we should not mistake 45 comments for a robust left-wing foreign policy critique versus just what he's saying, not so bad after all, like torture. I agree with you completely. There's no positive sign for anything with Donald Trump. Kelly.
And
you guys, this is not good.
E.
Nefer. Mother Jones, Senate Democrats have announced the plan to hold the Senate floor vote for the next 24 hours to speak against President Trump's pick of education for Betty DeVos. I would throw this energy at Jeff Sessions, to be honest. I get that she's the most vulnerable, but Jeff Sessions is, as Attorney General, they're all unacceptable. He's beyond unacceptable.
I think you're right, though. It is all about political. She's the most politically toxic. Because Hovind is, or not Hovind, but
Heller.
Heitkamp in North Dakota has been posting stuff about DeVos like every day.
Oh, wow. So she's really...
That's the stand she's making.
All right. Pearl Clutching. I can't believe young people saying such horrible, hateful things about me. If my husband, Henry Clutching, were still around, God rest his soul, he'd give you quite a talking to. And the final I am of the day... Mbwanara, Michael, I await your new character, revolutionary anti-imperialist Trump. That kind of happened in the summer. I don't think what Trump was saying was that, look, I'm tired of U.S. hypocrisy. Well, by the way, what's the difference between an assassination program and killing someone? It's the same thing. It's like Gandhi said, you need to embody the change you seek in the world. I mean, it's true. I don't think Trump was saying that the killing machine was bad. He was just saying they're killers, we are killers. Let's get on with killing, which is very different than a typical anti-imperialist position. Exactly. You nailed it. Thank you, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there.